right, everyone, we back after the break. And then before the break, we were starting to look at the impact of a certain transactions on the accounting equation and on the general ledger. So we said then, sorry, I think I'm not showing it on the screen. Just give me a minute. There we go. Salama, is it up on the screen now?
Yes, Ina, I was just going to tell
Okay.
you it's perfect now. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, so as I was saying before the break, then we were starting to look at different transactions and how they impact both the accounting equation and the general ledger. And we said that you must be careful in an assessment question. Are we asking only for the accounting equation, or are we asking for the general ledger as well? Because obviously that would be then for a lot more marks if you also have to give us the general ledger accounts. So the first two transactions that we looked at was the one where the owner contributed cash to the business, and in the other instance, the owner contributed a vehicle to the business. And we saw that the impact on the accounting equation was identical for these transactions. The only difference was here in the account that we're going to debit. For the cash transaction, we are debiting bank. And for the asset, we are debiting that vehicle account because the owner was contributing a vehicle. Okay, the next transaction that they had this time around, they said the business was going to repay one of its loans. So we're going to reduce the assets, we're reducing the liabilities, we're going to credit the bank, and we're going to debit the bank loan. So we are still going to use our debt click, but remember earlier I said we're going to debit our assets if it is an increase, but this time around the asset is decreasing. So this time around, we're going to credit the asset because the asset is decreasing. And the same on this side, we said we will credit liabilities if they increase, but in this question or this transaction, we are repaying some of the loan, so we're going to debit the loan account. Okay, so for both the bank and for that loan, both of those accounts are decreasing. So that's why we're going with the opposite for these entries. And the next thing is, and I think Salama also touched on it earlier, often students aren't sure what do they use here for these general ledger account names. And I'm sure you can all guess which slide I'm going to put up next. It is this, my favorite slide, because in this chart of accounts, we actually give you all the general ledger account names. So if you are not sure, okay, what account to use, then you have to think back again to your chart of accounts. These are examples of general ledger account names. So these are the types of wording and names that we want to see here when we ask you which account will be debited and which account will be credited. Okay, the next transaction now, we're paying salaries by EFT. And remember again, if we say via EFT, in your mind, you can translate that to, oh, this is a cash transaction, and any cash transactions are recorded in the bank account. So you can see here in the first one, we said it was a cash transaction, and we recorded it in the bank. And here we use the wording via EFT. And EFT also means a cash transaction. And so we are also going to record that in our bank account. So our expense account, our salaries are increasing. So I'm going to debit my salaries account and I'm going to credit my asset, my bank account, because my bank is decreasing. So here you can see my assets are decreasing as well as my owner's equity. Now, oftentimes students will now ask, but why is the owner's equity decreasing if in fact my salaries was increasing? If that is a question that you have, then you must always think back to our accounting equation. And the fact that owner's equity has actually got these four components: capital, drawings, income, and expenses. And it is now particularly around this expense that we are talking about now. So here is that same entry now. So we paid the salaries. I think we're all happy with a minus under assets because we're paying the money out of the bank. But it is this minus that I think is causing the problem. So remember again that owner's equity has got those four components. So if the individual expense increases, you can see my arrow here. So if an individual expense increase, we must always think on how will it now impact owner's equity. So if an individual expense increases, the impact on owner's equity is that the owner's equity is going to decrease. And the reason for that is because income and expenses makes up the profit of the business. And the higher the expenses are, that will mean that there is less profit that will then go to the owner. So this minus that I'm using there is referring to the overall impact of the transaction on owner's equity. Okay, so if my expense increases, owner's equity decreases because that is the overall impact on the owner's equity. Salama, anything from your end?
Hi, Ina. I think I have in the chat, I also just tried to give them a tip there to always just remember that capital and income increases the owner's equity, that drawings and expenses decrease owner's equity. So therefore, if we usually I just draw the little P account above the owner's equity. So, which means it will also assist the students to know when to put the pluses and the minuses, and also whether to debit or credit. So, if it's drawings and expenses, they should just remember, as you just explained now, that the impact is that it increases the owner's equity, so the wealth of owner. Okay, and the profit will be decreasing, and that capital and income will increase the owner's equity. Thanks, Ina.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Um,
let's go.
sorry,
Sorry.
Ina, maybe also very important for them. I always tell them to draw the little thing on the accounting equation, the answer sheet when they're going to the test so that they can draw their little dead click, dead click rules to write them at the above that so that, they're guided by it. Yes. It's very important for them to just note this down on so.
Okay, so that's this one that Salama is referring to. She says just to remind you to always draw your dead click at the top of your answer booklet. And you'll also see, as we do all our other revision sessions, we're going to keep coming back to dead click as well, just to remind you of the importance, and particularly then to help you know whether it goes on the debit or the credit side of the account. Okay, let's go to our next.
Hi, Ina. We have a question here from Davina. Okay. I think Davina wants to know, can you add the amount of the 200,000 and the 150 because it's a capital contribution? I would say yes, for capital, we can add it up to be one amount, but here in assets, we need to distinguish that the one amount is for bank and for vehicle. She just needs to, can we maybe just clarify that?
Yes, I fully agree with you. If we asked you only the impact on owner's equity, of course, then it wouldn't matter because they both go to the same elements. But because we're also asking you the general ledger accounts, you can't just combine it because one is bank, one is vehicles. And I would rather recommend, even for the two capitals, what do you say, Salama? I think I would rather split them between the two entries.
Mm. Yes, I also agree. It's better split them.
Okay, so let's now go on to our next transaction. This time around, we are buying some inventory and we're buying on credit. So this time around, we know now it's going to impact our liabilities because we are buying on credit. So it's going to impact our creditors control, which now our liability is increasing. So we know now that means we've got to credit it. And our asset, trading inventory, is also increasing. So we are going to debit our asset. The next one, here we are selling some of our inventory. And remember, when we sell the inventory, we've actually got two entries that we need to make. The first entry, we're going to record the actual sale. And this was again a credit sale. So it's going to impact our asset called debtors. And it's going to impact our income account sales. And both of these are increasing. But then the second transaction, and this is the one students sometimes forget about, is that this transaction also impacts our trading inventory and our cost of sales. Because we are selling some of our inventory, we need to be reducing our inventory, and the expense account that goes with it is cost of sales. So you can see we are reducing our asset inventory and we're reducing our owner's equity with this expense account called cost of sales. So the difference between the sale and the cost of sale is then the profit that the business made on the sale of this inventory. Just got another slide here, also just to show it to you. And this transaction will look the same whether it is a credit sale or if it is a cash sale. The only difference here will be whether we take it to the bank account in the general ledger or whether we take it to the debtors control in the general ledger. But the rest of the entries look exactly the same for a cash or a credit sale. Then the next one, our owner took some of the inventory. So remember, when the owner takes from the business, we use the drawings account. And when the owner contributes to the business, we use the capital account. So we're using dead click again. So we're debiting drawings and we're crediting inventory because we're going to have less inventory because the owner took some of the inventory, and the impact on our owner's equity is also minus 500. So in the last few transactions, all of these transactions had to do with inventory. First, on the 12th, we bought some inventory. Then we sold some inventory, and our owner took some inventory. And all of these transactions were recorded in a specific manner because in the question, they told us that the business is using the perpetual inventory system. It is key that you need to check your question in your test to see which inventory system is being used by the business. Because there is also another inventory system, and that's called the periodic inventory system. Now, up until the end of Learning Unit 2, we only really just give you a brief introduction to the two inventory systems. And then right at the end of the semester, in Learning Unit number 6, we are going to go into this in a lot more detail. So in terms of your first semester test, make sure that you know this table on page 68 in your textbook, because up until at the end of Learning Unit 2, we really can only test you on what is in this table. And then at the end in your exam, we can give you a much more detailed question, because then you would have covered Learning Unit number 6. Next one, we're buying some office refreshments. So again, this is an expense item. So we know the expense will be debited because it's going to increase, but the impact on owner's equity is that it's going to decrease owner's equity. And again, any transaction for cash impacts the bank account. Bank account is your asset, but your asset is also decreasing. Now, when you've completed all the transactions given to you in a specific question, I always recommend that you just do a quick test and you just double check, are my assets actually equal to my owner's equity plus liabilities? So let's quickly check if we did all our transactions correctly. So owner's equity comes to 343,800. Liabilities comes to 10,000. And if I add those two together, then it gives me the assets. And so then I quickly add up my assets to see if I actually get to 353,800. Because what we often find when we're marking these questions, students might have got the symbol incorrect. So they might have put a plus, say, on the one side and a minus on the other side, or they might have written 8,000 and then said 80,000. And of course, if you've made those kind of mistakes, it will pick it up when you do this calculation quickly, just to confirm to yourself that, in fact, for every transaction, my assets are equal to my owner's equity and liabilities. So for me, that is another exam tip, is when you're asked to do these questions where you have to do the impact on the owner's equity, or rather, sorry, the impact on the accounting equation, then quickly just tally all three of your columns and make sure that your assets are really equal to your owner's equity plus liabilities. And then the next thing is, it is so important that you must show us your symbol or your action. With other words, is it increasing or is it decreasing? If we can't see your plus or your minus, you won't get the mark for the amount. So please, please, please don't forget, you must show us the action. And that is the same whether it's an increase or a decrease. You need to show us for both of those the action. Now, when you prepare yourself for the upcoming test, always remember in first year accounting, there's actually only a small number of transactions that we can really test you on. And if you know how to treat all of these transactions in the accounting equation and in the general ledger, then there's really not much else that we can ask you in this first semester test. So the typical transactions would be your owner contributing either cash or an asset, your owner taking from the business cash or assets, we're buying inventory or any other kinds of assets. And this can be either for cash or on credit. Then we are paying expenses. And then we are selling inventory for cash or for credit. We can make a loan or repay a loan. And then these last two, we can, our debtor can pay us the outstanding balance, or the business can pay the balance on the creditor. If you know how to do all of these transactions, the impact on the general ledger, and the impact on the accounting equation, then you will see when you go through your questions in the textbook, all of those questions are really just variations of this same set of transactions. Okay, let's recap now on our study and our exam tips. So, how are you now going to be preparing yourself for the upcoming test? First up, you're going to find a quiet spot with a desk where you can actually sit and physically write out questions. For accounting questions, it is important that in your preparation time, you need to physically be writing out the answer. And for that, you need to be sitting at your desk and writing out the answer before you start marking it. Then you're going to pick a textbook question and you are going to do that question in full. Once you finish the question, you're going to mark it against the answer at the back of your textbook, and you're going to identify those entries where you were still struggling with. Then you're either going to go back to your textbook, you're going to go to ARC, or if you were really battling, you can even contact your lecturer to ask you just to help you with the part that you didn't understand. And then you can tackle another similar question to see if you can now do the entry that you were struggling with the last time. And also try for some of the questions to see if you are able to complete them within the correct amount of time. Because that is really where many students struggle, is that they can't work at the right speed when they are there in the exam hall. And then they don't finish the paper, or they end up leaving out questions or rushing through questions, which is then not good. Also, once again, make sure that you are reading your required. You can see for all of them here at the bottom, for these accounting equation type questions, we give a little example of what your answer must look like. So please don't jump in and start the question before you haven't first looked at this example, because there can be different ways in which we want you to set out your answer. So, for example, in this one, we wanted the amounts at the top and directly below it, the two general ledger accounts. Where in this one, we wanted you to give account debit and account credit in separate columns, and then the impact on the accounting equation. And in this one, it was again slightly different, where you had to kind of give the account name and the amount in the different columns. So please make sure that you are really first just looking at the example that's given to you under the required, so that you are setting out your answer correctly, so that you can optimize your marks. Salama, anything more from your side?
Okay, hi. Yes, maybe I think I've said there now. Remember, you're not just studying accounting, you're learning the language of the business, and this you know from learning Unit 1. So start strong now, and the rest of the semester will get easier. Believe in yourself, that is very important. And then test one is your chance just to build your momentum as you get going for your test. Thank you, Ina. Just maybe one important thing I also want them to take note of is when they will be reading the required, it's very important with the accounting equation to take note of the perpetual and periodic, and also to note that even though there's not much activities on um, a business is rendering a service, they should also maybe just revise that question on page 2.9, because it is the only example in the textbook, where we had a transaction for services rendered, and the account's name could be services rendered or current income. So maybe they should just note that, and that's services rendered current income will then increase owner's equity. I think you did share it with all the different transactions, but thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Students, any last questions on Learning Unit 2? I think just for the sake of time, we are going to move over now to the next. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing, am I? Let me just share my screen quickly. There we go. So we're now going to move over to Learning Unit 1. So if there are any last minute questions on Learning Unit 2, you can put them in the chats. Just to recap then, you're going to study your definitions. You're going to study that chart of accounts. You're going to complete all your Learning Unit 2 textbook examples and questions. And don't forget about those extra questions in Learning Unit number 7. And remember again, there are solutions to all the textbook questions at the back of your textbook. Then in ARC, there's another video that you can watch on the accounting equation. So if you do need a bit of a refresh on that, there's an ARC video. And then there's also those catch-up videos that you can watch on this learning unit. So there's 2 of them on Learning Unit 2. There's 2 catch-up videos. And up here is where you can find them. They're on the My Emirates, My Academics Quick Links catch-up videos. So if you need some more help on Learning Unit 2, definitely go and watch those videos. Right, while I switch over my slides, if you've got any more Learning Unit 2 questions, then Salama will help you with that. Salama, can I jump back in? Are the students, have they asked all their questions?
See.
Oh, is it sharing? Is my no?
No, not sharing.
Okay,
No
let's just do that.
questions. All seems good for Learning Unit 2.
Okay, let's see now. How are we doing now? Is it sharing? Yeah, there we go. I think it's sharing
I
now.
can.
Okay. Okay, students, then to wrap up our revision day today, we are just going to talk through Learning Unit 1 and just touch on some of the important issues there in Learning Unit number 1. As mentioned earlier, it's myself and Salama here in the classroom. Remember, our session is being recorded and it will be uploaded for you to YouTube so that you can watch it either again for this test or later on, like when you are preparing for the exam. You can always come back to these recordings on YouTube to watch it again. As we said earlier, this first test then is covering Learning Units 1 and 2. It's 50 marks and it is 1 hour. And remember, we are not taking shortcuts in our path to success. We are coming to class, we're working at home, and we are making sure that we are not falling behind. Okay, so Learning Unit 1 is your broad introduction to business bookkeeping and accounting. And as I said earlier, I always like to just go back to the module outline and to just look at what are the learning unit outcomes for this particular learning unit so that I can know what are the main things to focus on when I prepare for a particular learning unit. So in this learning unit is very theory dense. There are really no kind of sums, if you will, that we can make in this learning unit. So in this learning unit, all the learning really sits on your shoulders as students. So in this learning unit, I would highly recommend that you either make a summary for yourself, or you make some kind of a mind map of the information, or you even look at making an infographic, because this learning unit is just so dense in theory that you have to find ways of breaking it up for yourself into smaller and more manageable bits. So I'm sure by now your lecturers have already helped you to start summarizing this information, because otherwise it can be quite overwhelming if you just look at this whole learning unit that is just bumper packed with theory. On ARC, once again, there are actually 2 videos that can also be of assistance to you, that will also give you a bit of an overview, particularly on 2 topics: the accounting cycle and then financial versus management accounting. And earlier I showed you as well our catch-up videos. And for this learning unit, there's one video all on its own. There's the video number 1 of 4 that covers a learning unit 1. And again, they are available to you on the My Emirates, My Academics. So please optimize these videos just to give you that extra little bit of support as you're getting ready for the test. So I think you've now seen this has now been a bit of a theme throughout our presentation today, is the importance of knowing your theory. And it was important in Learning Unit 2, but it's even more so in Learning Unit 1, because in Learning Unit 1, there is only theory. And remember, your semester test is only covering 2 learning units. So if you don't know your theory from Learning Unit 1, then you are already only going to be able to answer a half or 2/3 of the paper. So it is important that you must know your theory from this learning unit as you're getting ready for the test. So let's look a little bit again in different ways that we can test you on this learning unit 1. So there's all kinds of different types of questions that we can do out of this learning unit. We can do multiple choice, match the column, true and false, complete a sentence, short answers, short paragraphs, and in some cases there could be a bit of an application question. But that's a sort of typical formatting of questions you can expect out of this learning unit. So here we can see, for example, in 2022 and in 2023, they asked the students a series of true and false questions, all based out of learning unit number 1. Okay, so certainly in the past, students have been asked these true and false questions. Then in 2024, they went with the match the column question. And this question is similar to your textbook question 1.2. So if you want to go and revise a similar question at home, look at question 1.2 of your textbook. And again, remember those extra additional revision questions at the back of your textbook in learning unit number 7. There is a question number 9 that is also a match the column question. So there you can have a second opportunity to test your understanding against these types of questions. And remember again, there are solutions to all the textbook questions at the back of the textbook. The next question, type of question, was they gave the student 10 examples of functions fulfilled either by management accounting or financial accounting. And then the student just had to indicate for each one of these, would that be done by the management accounting department or the financial accounting department? And this question is quite similar to question 1.4 in your textbook. It looks a little bit different, but it's the same kind of idea as 1.4 in the textbook. And essentially, it is referring to that section 1.5.1 of your textbook. Your job now, before the upcoming assessment, is really just to practice as many questions as possible, because that will just help you to kind of see all the different ways in which we can really ask you this information, so that when you come into the assessment, it is not going to be a shock or a surprise to you and say, oh goodness, now I don't know what this means. Then you can just say, oh, hang on, I've seen something similar in the textbook. Yes, I know what I need to do here. Remember, we said you're first going to practice your textbook examples and questions before you go to the past papers, because that will give you the right foundation then before you jump into your past paper questions. Then the next questions, these are the ones where you kind of either have to list or to name or to explain. And these questions were regarding the users of the financial information. Again, make sure that you are checking the mark allocation in each instance, particularly for these where you have to list, name, or explain. You should be guided by the marks that has been given. So clearly, if we're giving you 5 marks, you can't write down only one of the users of financial information. And in the question, we do say we are requiring 5. So again, make sure you are reading your required properly. And of course, the marks are matched up to what we required. Where in the previous one, we only wanted a short answer saying, why does lenders use financial information? And so we only awarded 1 mark. So in this one, then obviously you mustn't write a 5-mark paragraph, because then that is just going to take up too much of your time, which then means you're not going to have time to answer another question properly. So it's definitely important to always keep your eye on this mark allocation, these mark allocations, so that will guide you then how much we want you to write in these types of questions. And remember again, the users of our financial information is the investors, the lenders, the employees, the government, the management, the general public, customers, suppliers, and trade creditors. And on these users, you must be able to name all of them, and you must be able to also give us a short description of why each of these groups will be using the financial information. And that is in section 1.2 of your textbook. So please make sure you are studying this as well. Salama, anything from your end?
Hi, Ina. No, everything is fine on my side. Thanks. I've got no questions from the students here also.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next type of a question we can ask you is to fill in the blanks or to complete a sentence. So, for example, in this question, we gave the students the bookkeeping cycle. We gave them the first step and the last step in the bookkeeping cycle, and then they had to provide us with the next 3. Again, we're looking at the mark allocation, so we see that it is 1 mark given per step. Let's just go through that again then. Remember, your bookkeeping cycle starts with a transaction that takes place. This transaction will be captured onto a source document, and a source document in the definition is either paper-based or an electronic record. We're going to then capture our source document into the journals. And as we move through the INAC module, you will see that we will cover each of these steps in the bookkeeping cycle. There is a learning unit covering each of these steps. So we're going to cover, we are going to capture our source documents into the journals, and the journal is a table of similar transactions. So what we're going to do with our source documents, we're going to group together similar transactions and then capture them into their journals. At the end of the month, when we've done the journal, we are going to post our journal to our general ledger. And our general ledger, you will remember, is that collection of accounts. And then right at the end of the month, we are going to draw up a trial balance that will consist out of all the totals and balances on these general ledger accounts. And these steps from when the transaction takes place over here until we get to the trial balance, we refer to that as the bookkeeping cycle of the business. And this bookkeeping cycle takes place on a monthly basis. And once we've completed the bookkeeping cycle 12 times, we would have completed the accounting cycle. And the accounting cycle is an annual cycle that ends with the preparation of the financial statements. So we repeat this bookkeeping cycle every month of the financial year until we've completed it 12 times, and then we are ready to prepare the financial statements of the business. This bookkeeping and accounting cycle then is covered. There's a nice little diagram in your textbook in section 1.6 of your textbook. And you'll see when we get to learning units 4 and 5, we are going to show you the practical application of the cycle, because then we're going to show you how to write up the journals. We're going to show you how to post to the general ledger and how to draw up a trial balance. And last type of question we can ask you is the question where we ask you to write a short paragraph. So for example, here we wanted to know what some of the advantages and disadvantages was to start a sole proprietorship. This question was very similar to your question 1.9. And now again, we're guiding ourselves. So we see this question is for 6 marks. So already we know it's not just one of each. And if we read a bit further, we see it's 4 advantages and 2 disadvantages. So that is how we're going to get to the 6 marks. And then in the next question, your friend was asking about the informal business sector, and we had to name the 4 characteristics of the indigenous or informal business sector. And that is question 1.8 of your textbook. So I hope you're also starting to see a trend here. You can see each time when I put up a past paper question, we are able to match it back to a textbook question. So that is just to reinforce again the importance of you working through your textbook questions, because often the questions from the questions in your assessment is taken directly from your textbook. The question is just slightly adapted, but it is nearly the same question that is in your textbook. So please, students, we can't overemphasize the importance of you having to work with your textbook questions. And as I said, particularly in these longer style questions, check the mark allocation, because you need to make sure then if it's for 6 marks, you need to give us 6 facts. Or 4 marks, then we want 4 of these characteristics of the informal business sector. As I said, if you do want to go and look at past papers, once, of course, not to forget, only once you've done all your textbook examples and questions, then you can go to the My Emirates landing page, library past papers. But just remember, for our module, you need to look under book 5111, because in the previous years, it shared assessments with INAC 5111. So please make sure then just that you're looking under book 5111, otherwise you won't find assessments. Salama, anything at this stage from your end?
Hi, Ina. I can just remind them again that this learning unit is very important, like you mentioned, that because the test will only focus on learning unit 1 and 2, that they will really have to study the theory, because there will be questions coming from learning unit 1. And also this learning unit is so very important because it gave them a very good introduction to um, the learning units that we will be covering later on. As you mentioned, when we were working through the um, counting cycle, the importance of journals, and step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. So it's just very important that they do study the theory here. And as you mentioned again, please work through all the questions in the textbook before proceeding to the past test papers, and also revision questions that your lecturer uploaded on ARC. And that's all for now. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks for that reminder, Salama. Also, your lecturer would have uploaded to you on ARC these past papers. So all the questions here in the slides, we made a pack of these questions with their solutions. So if you now didn't quite get particularly that Learning Unit 2 question that we did, your lecturer should have uploaded for you on ARC the past paper pack with the answers that you can then also use as part of your revision. So let's just go through it then in terms of your study tips. So what are you going to be doing from now until the actual test date? Is you are going to find that quiet spot where you study at your best, but it must have a desk because you must be able to physically write out the answer. It doesn't help to kind of just look at the answer in the back of the textbook and say, yeah, that looks okay, that looks okay. You must actually physically write it out. That's the real test if you know how to answer these questions. So you're going to pick a question then from the back, from the textbook. You're going to write your answer out in full, and then once you've completed your answer, you are going to mark it against those solutions given to you in the back of the textbook. And you're either going to say, okay, I understand this concept, or you're going to identify potential problem areas and say, oh, I didn't really understand transaction 5 and 6. Then you're going to see if you can find other resources that can help you to understand those transactions, or you're just going to pick another similar question where you just get to practice it again and see if you can now do those types of transactions. And if you are working with the past paper questions, try and see if you can do it at the right speed as well. So do that calculation where you take the marks allocated to the question, you multiply it by 1.2. That will tell you how long the question should take, and then set your timer, maybe on your cell phone. Set your timer and see, can I complete this question in the time allocated? And that's also why it is so important that you actually have to physically write out the answer in full. Because I think we've all become quite spoiled by doing all of our work on a device. But typing at a certain speed and actually writing something by hand is quite different. So it is important that you must be able to physically write out a complete answer in the time that is allocated to the answer. And then we said that you must now practice from now until the test. You're going to practice as many questions as you can possibly fit in over the next while. So in terms of learning unit 1 then, all important, you have to try and break up this big chunk of theory for yourself into manageable portions. So you either have to be making a summary of the learning unit, draw mind maps, infographics, whatever works for you, but you just need to try and make it into smaller chunks that is easy for you to manage. And then this learning unit has got 9 questions that you can work through to test your knowledge on the learning unit. Remember again, there's answers to all the textbook questions at the back of your textbook. And then once you are in that exam venue or in your test venue, the first thing is you're going to make sure you are managing your time and you are not spending too much time on a question. You are going to make sure that you know exactly what it is that is being required from you, because of course that can also be a time waster if you thought you had to do one thing and then later realize, oh, hang on, I had to do something else. So these two, you can actually nearly say go hand in hand. That you manage your time, and the way you're going to manage it is to make sure you know and understand exactly what they want me to do. And then if this test paper requires you to make any kind of calculations, then please remember to be showing us all your workings. You might remember from my previous example where the calculation was for 7 marks. And if you get that, if you only give us your final answer and it's wrong, then you get 0 out of 7, which is then a very large chunk out of a paper that is only out of 50 marks. But if you show us your workings, then at least you can get some of the marks. So you can get some of those 7 marks. And this, you will actually see if you join us again in our next revision webinar. These points we are always going to be raising in each of the webinars, because they can really, really make the difference between doing well in this paper and not doing well. Salama, I think you've got some last points that you just want to share with our students.
Yes, thank you, Ina. Again, I'm just going to, I think they are similar to what you have just reminded them now. Study your theory, connected, everything links as we go along. I'm sure you've actually realized that now. That in learning unit 1, you just build foundation with regard to Pacioli's double entry, counting principle, and then of course also we focused on the application of funds, and then we went further on to the chart of accounts, the different transactions. And now in Learning Unit 2, you are actually now recording those different transactions. So you can see how the story is connecting. And very importantly, just daily practice, small little bits will lead to you being successful in your upcoming test. And also very important, guys, is maybe you can sit down with your friend, teach him a concept. In that way, you actually also get a better understanding. And very importantly, on Monday, please arrive at campus early. Okay, you know your time, as Ina mentioned, you need to look at your pairs. And if I'm not mistaken, Ina, I think you are writing at 2:30. So please try to be at the venue, if not an hour earlier, at least 30 minutes, because invigilators allow the students to get into the venue early, and they are very strict in that they start on time. If you are going to arrive late at the venue, the invigilator is not going to give you extra time, and that will then just give you now, will make you feel a bit anxious. Okay, so please arrive early, and most importantly, remain calm during the test. if for whatever reason you do feel anxious, just breathe in. And also, if it's a question that you unsure of or not able to answer, please just move on to answer the next question and you can always come back. Okay, so don't waste unnecessary time on trying to get to answer, rather move on to a question you know best. Okay, so again, Ina, what I would also remind students is it does not mean that it's a question, okay, you've seen past papers now, there could be 3 or 4 questions in your test. It does not mean that you have to start with question 1. Okay, so always try to start with the question you feel most confident with. Okay, all right, believe in yourself, don't give up, and your confidence will improve your performance, and just do your best on this test. Very confident that you all will be doing very well on your upcoming test 1. Good luck, everyone. And thank you once again for taking the time to join myself and Ina this morning. All the best.
Thanks, Salama. And I hope, students, you're also seeing a trend through this presentation today, that when it comes to accounting, please don't leave your preparation until the day or two before the test. Your job is to be working consistently throughout the semester, and that will really make it so much easier for you when you come towards the test, because then you don't have to sort of try and cram in all these different facts and figures and things. So really, if you maybe haven't done it yet up until test 2, now from now on, if you haven't maybe done it up to test 1, as you now also getting ready for test 2, really you can take all of these principles with you already in starting to prepare for test 2. Things like working at home, working through all your textbook questions. And then you'll see when we have this next session for test 2, you will already feel a lot more confident for that second test. So then just our reminders then, as we said, you've got 60 minutes for 50 marks. And you must make sure you're sticking to the allocated time. And as Alama said, obviously you won't be given any extra time if you did not arrive on campus in time. You're going to make sure that you are reading your required properly. You are going to show us all of those workings. And then just this last point, we haven't mentioned it before, you are only allowed to work in pen. This is really important. So please remember that you must have a black or blue pen with you on the day, because you are only allowed to complete your answer booklet in pen. We are providing you with an answer booklet. And any tables or anything that will be needed, those will already be drawn up in the answer booklet. Okay, students, then as Alama said, thank you very much for joining us today. As we said, we will be hosting another session like this before semester test 2, and then also before the final exam. So we wish you everything of the very best, and we're looking forward to seeing just how well you are going to do in this upcoming semester test. I think there's still a few moments if anyone has got a few last minute questions. And I think just quickly send some love to Salama, who has been answering all your questions in the chats. And then, as I said, everything has been recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube if you need to have a look at the recording again. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Salama.
Thank you, Ina. Thank you, Ina. I think, we just had a question from a student regarding the recording. I just reminded him that it will be shared by the lecturer.